Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Haribo 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 Gora Haribo Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Shishi Pancha Tattva ki, Grantaraj Shri Chaitanya-caritamrita ki, Gaur Premanande, all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Should we test the new gizmo? Where did this come from? It just came out of this cup. Oh. Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavinda. Shri Chaitanya-caritamrita ki jai. I thought we could read from Antya-lila, chapter 10. This is entitled Lord Chaitanya Accepts Prasad. A chapter title, I believe, was rendered by some BBT editors, because that's one of the functions they had, was to create titles of chapters of Prabhupada's books, because traditionally there are no titles to chapters. There are a lot of nice pastimes in this chapter, and I would say one feature of this chapter is a glimpse into what we might call extraordinary routine. Like all of us, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu led a somewhat routine life in much of his life, especially in Puri when he was living in Jagannath Puri. As we know, every day he would go to the temple, just as we do, and he would worship Lord Jagannath, and he would have other routines, having meals at a more or less certain time, and he would go for his, what's sometimes referred to, his noontime duties, which means he would have gone to bathe for lunch. And also we hear about his resting after here. But also, of course, there's an extraordinary, a very extraordinary feature to Mahaprabhu's routine, and that is, especially when he is chanting and dancing, it is filled with an amazing emotional intensity, which manifests in physical ways in his body. This, by the way, brings up a topic I've been thinking about the last few days, and I'll just put it out there and we can look at it and throw it away or whatever. But there is a notion in European culture that started in the late 18th century and developed was expanded in the early 19th century, and that is the idea of the romantic hero. The perhaps founding literary work of this idea was a novel by Goethe. Who was he? Johannes Wolfgang Goethe? Friedrich? Wilhelm Goethe. Yeah? Does that sound right? Anyway, Goethe, you know Goethe. He was this German author who, he was something of a Renaissance fellow in a way. Anyway, he wrote one novel called Junge Werther. Junge Werther. The Suffering, that was it. The Suffering of young Werther. Yeah. Das Leiden der junge Werther. Yeah. And it's about this young fellow who falls in love with some lady who is engaged to be married to someone else. And so his love is hopeless. There's no hope for him to ever be able to, fulfill his wish to marry this lady. It's just not going to happen. And he lives a short life, and he dies young. I think he commits suicide. Yeah? He commits suicide. So this is the sort of young romantic. And the thing about the romantic hero is, it's not that he's just romantic in our modern sense of, absorbed in some romantic affair with someone of the opposite sex, but there's much more to it than that. He's a kind of social outsider, and it's usually a he, but there are she heroines also, romantic heroines. She's an outsider, and emotion is extremely important because emotions cannot be contained in the sort of social order of the day. And this emotional misfit is typically also creative. He writes poetry, and he wanders about in nature. He goes about in the forests and finds inspiration in the wildness of nature, whereas in some years before this, in the Enlightenment, there was also very much interest in nature, but it was about the order of nature, that nature follows laws. But the Romantics saw something else in nature. They saw wildness, they saw unpredictability, and they saw tempestuous, So this was what the Germans called Sturm und Drang. Sturm und Drang. Yeah, the storm and the force of nature. So the romantic hero kind of celebrated all of this. And but his life was so intense, it was like a comet that goes very fast, not a comet, but a meteor that, moves very fast, is very bright, but then because of the intensity of the life, it can't last very long. So this made me, I couldn't help but thinking, maybe there's some comparison here, however remote, to the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he's a kind of romantic hero. He is intensely in love. As in the mood of Srimati Radharani, though, he is he is she, and it's a kind of hopeless love in the sense that he's always longing for Krishna, who's always absent. And what's described in these final chapters of Antya-lila is how this longing reaches such an incredible intensity that, he cannot be contained. He can't be kept in his room, the gambira, despite their locking up the room, locking him inside. He somehow escapes, and it cannot be contained in his body. His body cannot be contained, and the emotions cannot be contained in his body. And also we don't like to say he dies, but he departs the world young, relatively young. It's considered that around the age of 48 he left the world. He's also an outsider. He takes sannyas, which is the kind of official, traditional Vedic way to be an outsider. Yeah, you become you declare yourself socially dead. But there's an irony, there's a kind of paradox there, because by becoming socially dead, he actually goes right to the center of society in a certain sense. The renunciant in Indian culture is, in a sense, right in the center of the culture. I suppose there are other parallels and no doubt also differences. We don't want to reduce Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to a early 19th century romantic. But anyway, there may be some interesting parallels. Okay. In this chapter, Mahaprabhu is celebrating the festivals of Lord Jagannath with his devotees. And one of these festivals is the boat festival of Govinda. There is an Utsavamurti in the Jagannath temple who is taken out on a certain occasion to one of the sarovaras near the temple, and he is set up on a boat, and they offer worship, and no doubt many people come. I haven't been for this, but then so many forms of worship will be there. So Lord Chaitanya went for this festival, and then Lord Govinda was returned to the temple. And then I'm at verse 53. Jagannatha dekhi punanija gore aila prasad anaya bhaktagane khau jaila. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to his residence after visiting the temple of Jagannath, he asked for a large quantity of Lord Jagannath's prasada, which he then distributed among his devotees so that they could eat sumptuously. So here we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributing prasadam. And this is another picture you can put in your mind of Lord Chaitanya serving the Vaishnavas. Ishtagoshti shabalaya katak kanakaila nija nija purva vasai shabai patayila. After talking with all the devotees for some time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked them to occupy the individual residences in which they had lived the previous year. So this is referring to the Bengal devotees who have, as usual, arrived for the period from the Jagannath Ratha Yatra, from Snan Yatra, 2 weeks before Jagannath Ratha Yatra, up through Janmashtami. So that's about a 3-4 month period. July, 3 months, I guess, July through August or early September. They would come all this way from Bengal down to Puri, about, 300 miles or 300 kilometers. Good distance. How big is, what's the distance between Koper and Maribor? 220 kilometers. Okay, so figure like that, but maybe another 100 kilometers. That's how far they would go. They would walk over some days. Okay, there is one devotee in Bengal. His name is Raghava Pandit, and he had a little tradition. He and his was it his wife or his sister? They would prepare these bags of prasad, special kinds of bags, special kinds of prasad that's described elsewhere, the contents of the bags. Raghava Pandit delivered the bags of edibles to Govinda, who kept them in a corner of the dining room, Bhojan Griha. Oh, I forgot to mention this verse before, 54. It's interesting. The word Ishtagoshti is there. You know what an Ishtagoshti is? Well, here it's translated simply that Lord Chaitanya was talking with the devotees for some time. But in the word for word, Prabhupada gives Ishtagoshti, discussion of spiritual matters. Ishtagoshti. Yeah, so it's bona fide. It's in the Chaitanya-caritamrita to have Ishtagoshti. But Ishtagoshti can be just two devotees speaking on spiritual matters. That's also Ishtagoshti. Govinda thoroughly emptied the bags from the previous year and kept them in another room to fill them with other goods. This is a little unclear to me, but somehow it seems like there are leftovers from the previous year. Lord Chaitanya has not, it's being stored. The next day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went with his personal devotees to see Lord Jagannath when Lord Jagannath arose early in the morning. And then after the Lord wakes up, after Lord Jagannath wakes up, then Mahaprabhu begins kirtan. And the kirtan, well, it says here that it was much like in the Ratha Yatra. Remember, in Ratha Yatra, he organizes 7 groups, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifests himself in 7 groups. Here, it seems that in the temple, they're having 7 groups of kirtaniyas. And again, Mahaprabhu is going to manifest in all 7 of these groups. And I'm summarizing here a little bit to move forward. As one might expect, it becomes too much ecstatic. The kirtan goes on and on. The king is witnessing all of this from a distance. The queens are watching from elevated parts of the palace. Okay, this made me wonder what's going on here, because that would suggest that it's going on outside. So is it in the temple or out of the temple? Maybe this is another description of another Ratha Yatra after all, but that's to me not entirely clear. Due to the forceful vibration of kirtan, the entire world began trembling. when everyone chanted the holy names, they made a tumultuous sound. And then Lord Chaitanya desires to dance. So watch out. So far, he's not even dancing. It's already too much ecstasy. But now Lord Chaitanya desires to dance. So he begins amidst these 7 groups. And then, verse 67, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remembered a line in the Orisen language and ordered Swarup Damodar to sing it. And here is the line from the song. Jagamohana parimunda jao. That's the line. Translation, let my head fall at the feet of Jagannath in the Kirtan hall known as Jagamohan. So he's going to remember this line and repeat it, and there's going to be too much ecstasy remembering this line. Jagamohan parimunda jao. The word Jagamohan in Vrindavan, in the Radharaman temple, some of you may have been there, you know there's this rather high platform before the deity room, between the Kirtan Mandap area where people can go and where the deity is inside. There's this large, rather high platform. They call that the Jagamohan in the Radharaman temple. So this makes me think something similar maybe there in the Jagannath temple. Incidentally, that Jagamohan in the Radharaman temple originally had steps on either side that visitors could go up and stand on that platform and view the deity from close. But they removed those steps in, I think it was the 1930s, when the government made a new law, which was that anyone could visit temples. Before that, it was restricted. Temples had each, I guess, their own policies, but in general, certain castes were not allowed, simply not allowed in the temple. But because of the campaigns, especially of Gandhi, they said, let the temples be open to everyone. And so they became open. So the response of the Radharaman Goswamis, these caste Brahmins, was, well, okay, we cannot stop people from entering, but we can stop them from coming up close. And so they removed the steps. And now it's only the temple priests who are allowed to go up there. So, Lord Chaitanya is dancing and tears are coming from his eyes. People all around him floated in the water of his tears. I mean, imagine this, to have enough water to float in would be quite a lot of water. Raising his 2 arms, verse 70, the Lord said, chant, chant, bol, bol. I've always been a little concerned that the word bol in Slavic languages means pain. Also in Slovenian? Yeah. Huh? Bol. Well, it's pretty much the same. Both. But you could say that by really chanting intensely in the kind of devotion that Lord Chaitanya feels, there is also pain, ecstatic pain of separation. But I just always wonder when we chant on the streets, Haribo, 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 and people must go, Hari pain, Hari pain, Hari pain, Hari pain. What are these people about? Okay, 71. Prabhu Pari Murchajai Shwasanahi Ar Achambite Utte Prabhu Korea Hunkar. The Lord fell to the ground unconscious, not even breathing. Then, suddenly, he stood up, making a loud sound. Hunkar. The hairs of his body constantly stood up like the thorns of the shimula tree. Sometimes his body was swollen and sometimes lean and thin. He bled. Blood was coming and perspired from every pore of his body. His voice faltered. Unable to say the line properly, he uttered only Jajagaga Parimumu. The verse was Jagamohan Parimunda Jao, and now he's chanting Jajagaga Parimumu. All his teeth shook as if each were separate from the others. Indeed, they seemed about to fall to the ground. So like this, there's too much ecstasy going on. And then, verse 77, then Lord Nityananda found a way to end the kirtan. He gradually stopped all the chanters. Thus, only one group continued chanting with Swarup Damodar, and they chanted very softly. When there was no longer a tumultuous sound, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to consciousness. Then Nityananda Prabhu informed him of the fatigue of the chanters and dancers. Mahaprabhu, the devotees are a little tired now. Oh, okay. Understanding the fatigue of the devotees, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stopped the congregational chanting. Then he bathed in the sea accompanied by them all. So they went out to have a little beach party. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took prasad with all of them and then asked them to return to their dwellings and take rest. And now comes this little interesting episode, loving exchange between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his servant Govinda. Gambira dvare karen appana shayana Govinda asya kare parasambhahana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lay down at the door of the Gambira, and Govinda came there to massage his legs. Then it explains this was the routine. This is what they would do every day. This time, when the Lord lay down, he occupied the entire doorway. Govinda could not enter the room, and therefore he made the following request. Ekapasha hao more dehabitar jaite Prabhu kahe Shakti nahi anga chalaite. Kindly turn on one side. Let me pass to enter the room. However, the Lord replied, I don't have the strength to move my body. Bara bara Govinda kahe ekadika hoite. Prabhu kahe anga ami nari chalaite. Govinda made his request again and again. But the Lord replied, I cannot move my body. Govinda kahe korite chahi para samvahana. Prabhu kahe korovana koro je loy tomar mono. Govinda repeatedly requested, I want to massage your legs. But the Lord said, do it or don't do it. It depends upon your mind. Tabe Govinda bahirvasa thara uppare diya mitare gore gela Mahaprabhure langiya. Then Govinda spread the Lord's wrapper, his bahirvasa, over the Lord's body, and in this way entered the room by crossing over him. So of course this would be a major aparad. You don't step over devotees. You don't step over parts of devotees. I always make this point. Sometimes we have devotees, many devotees in the temple, and we're all offering obeisances, and there's premandvani, and then there's invariably some devotee streaming through the temple, jumping over one, kicking another in the head. Why? Because they think they have to do this urgent service, which is to get asanas for everyone. So they have a very nice mood, they want to serve the Vaishnavas, but in the process, unlimited aparads are being made by stepping over devotees. Mm-hmm. Just wait until everyone gets up again, and then you can go through the temple. But Govinda couldn't wait. He felt that I have a service to do. I know this is not proper, but it's either I go and step over the Lord to do the service, or I don't. Either I do the service, or I can't do the service. What to do? I'll do my service. Even if this means that I become an offender, I will do my service. So this resolve is there. Govinda massaged the Lord's legs as usual. He pressed the Lord's waist and back very softly, and thus all the Lord's fatigue went away. As Govinda stroked his body, the Lord slept very nicely for about 45 minutes, and then his sleep broke. Danda dui, for 2 dandas. A danda is about, 24 minutes. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw Govinda sitting by his side, he was somewhat angry. Why have you been sitting here for so long today? The Lord asked. Why didn't you go to take your meal after I fell asleep? The Lord asked. Govinda replied, you were lying down, blocking the door, and there was no way to go. Prabhu kohe, bitare tobe aila khemone, taiche kene prasad laite na koila gomane. The Lord asked, how did you enter the room? Why didn't you go out to take your lunch in the same way? Govinda kahe mone amar seva she niyam aparadaha uk kiva narake gamana. Govinda mentally replied, my duty is to serve, even if I have to commit offenses or go to hell. Sheva lagi koti aparada nahi gani shanimitta aparadha base bhaya mani. I would not mind committing hundreds and thousands of offenses for the service of the Lord, but I greatly fear committing even a glimpse of an offense for my own self. Atta shabamone kori govinda rohila, prabhu je puchila tara uttara nadila. Thinking in this way, Govinda kept silent. He did not reply to the Lord's inquiry. Pratyaha prabhur nidrai jana prasad loite she divashe shramadeki logila chapite. It was Govinda's practice to go take lunch when the Lord was asleep. On that day, however, seeing the Lord's weariness, Govinda continued massaging his body. There was no way to go. How could he leave? When he thought of crossing over the Lord's body, he considered it a great offense. And then Krishnadas, the author of Chaitanya-caritamrita, now speaks his purport. Eshabahoy bhakti shastra shukma marma Chaitanya kripajane eshabadharma. These are some of the finer points of etiquette in devotional service. Only one who has received the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can understand these principles. There's a short purport to this we can read. Karmis, fruitive workers, cannot understand the finer conclusions of devotional service because they accept only its ritualistic value, but do not understand how devotional service satisfies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The karmis view the formalities as a means of advancing in religion, economic development, sensual satisfaction, and liberation. Although these are only material results of following religious principles, the karmis consider them everything. Such ritualistic activities are called karma. Karmis who adopt devotional service very loosely and who therefore remain on the platform of material activities are called prakrita sahajiyas. They cannot understand how pure devotional service is rendered in paternal and conjugal love. For this can be understood only by the special mercy bestowed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu upon pure devotees. So, we mentioned, I guess it was day before yesterday, we were reading about Mahaprabhu's childhood pastimes, how there's Vatsalya Rasa, and there's also Adbhuta Rasa, and I forgot to mention there was also quite a lot of Hasya Rasa, the mood of humor, especially when Lord Chaitanya, little Nimai, has this joking exchange, this argument with his mother about eating dirt and eating sweets. So we read this and we find it very humorous. And so much of, especially the childhood pastimes, there's lots of humor there. Well, here we're getting Dasya Rasa. Here we have Govinda, the servant. He is doing his service. And his service is a very intimate one, to massage the Lord's legs and so on. And the exchange is very intimate. And so it's, whereas one would normally think, okay, servant, that means, it's all kind of formal. We might think of, in Western culture, wealthy families would have a butler. You know what a butler is? What's the Slovenian? Butler. Huh? Okay. So, he's dressed in a sort of dark suit, this image of the butler standing always sort of direct and having a very non-expressive face and sort of having a towel or a napkin over his arm. He's always ready for service and he always says, "Yes, sir." "No, sir." Oh, indeed, sir. I will attend to it immediately. Huh? Yes, it's a very English thing. British, I dare say. So that's our idea of, servant. But here we have a whole different idea. Here's a very, very sweet relationship, and it is said that in all the various rasas, in bhakti rasa, there's always sweetness. So there's always some madhurya, because all of the rasas are in one way or another directed toward the Lord's, facilitating the Lord's madhurya rasa, and therefore each one partakes in madhurya. But here, it's, you might say, not so directly supporting the madhurya rasa of Lord Chaitanya, although, I don't know, one might argue that it is. Still, there's a kind of sweetness there of intimacy, but also of making a very important point about devotion. Devotion is for the other, it is not for myself. My service is for the Lord, it is not for myself. Therefore, I will risk my own trouble for service. I will not make some offense on my own account. So it's quite nice. And then Krishnadas goes on to say, the Lord is very interested in manifesting the exalted qualities of his devotees, and that is why he engineered this incident. Eshava prakashite koila etabangi. He manifested this incident. Okay, then Krishnadas says, now I've discussed this subject. Oops, time's gone. Okay. Then it's summarizing. He says, I will not expand this because it's already been described. The Jagannath festival, how the devotees stayed for 4 months, it says here. And then, verse 108, each devotee would bring a certain type of prasad. He would entrust it to Govinda and request him, please arrange that the Lord will surely eat this prasad. Some brought paida, a coconut preparation. Some brought sweet balls, and some brought cakes and sweet rice. The prasad was of different varieties, all very costly. Govinda would present the prasad and say to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this has been given by such and such devotee. The Lord, however, would not actually eat it. He would simply say, keep it in storage. Govinda kept accumulating the food, and soon it filled a corner of the room. There was quite enough to feed at least 100 people. Now, I can't help but wondering, if there were so many sweets, how did the ants keep out? Because in India, you can be on the 5th floor of a building and you have one, sweet, one gulab jamun. Within minutes, the ants will be there. They have special radar for sweets. All the devotees asked Govinda with great eagerness, have you given Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the prasad brought by me? When the devotees questioned Govinda, he had to tell them lies. Therefore, one day he spoke to the Lord in disappointment. Acharjari Mahashoy Korea Jatane Tomare Kao Jaite Vastu Den Namorastane. Many respectable devotees, headed by Advaita Acharya, make a great endeavor to entrust me with the varieties of food for you. Tumi she nakao, tara puche bara bara, kotta banchana karimu kemone amar nishtar. You do not eat it, but they ask me again and again, how long shall I go on cheating them? How shall I be freed from this responsibility? So here's Govinda. He's trying to be an honest man. But if he would tell the truth, what's going to happen then? All these devotees will be very upset. Prabhu kohe adivasha dukkha kahe mane Kebaki diache taha ano ekone ekane. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, why are you so foolishly unhappy? Bring here to me whatever they've given you. Oh, that's interesting. Prabhupada explains that Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that the word adivasya, which is in this verse, it refers to a person who has been living with another person for a very long time. So here Govinda is being addressed as adivasya because he's been with Mahaprabhu for such a long time. Whereas other devotees would come and go. In effect, the Lord told Govinda, since you have been living with me for a long time, you should not be foolishly disappointed in this situation. Bring all the food to me and you will see that I can eat it. So now we're going to see what might be called a miracle. Ettabali Mahaprabhu Boshila Bojane Namadhari Dhari Govinda Kore Nivedane. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down to eat. Then Govinda offered him the preparations one after another, and as he did so, he spoke the name of the person who had given each one. Acharjera e paida pana sharapupi e amrita gutika manda karpura kupi. These preparations, paida, sweet rice, cakes made with cream, and also amrita gutika, manda, and a pot of camphor, have been given by Advaita Acharya. Shivas panditer e onek prakar, pita pana amrit manda padmachini ar. Next, there are varieties of food, cakes, cream, amritamanda, and padmachini, given by Shivas Pandit. And so on. This seems to be one of Krishnadas Kaviraj's favorite things to do in Chaitanya-caritamrita, is to describe in detail feasts. I suspect that Krishnadas Kaviraj liked to eat. And it could be the case that he was feeling separation from certain Bengal preparations which were not available in Vrindavan. And so he would remember, Amrita Gutika, so long since I have had Amrita Gutika. Yeah, so like this, he's describing all the gifts, and he's then mentioning all these devotees. Now, there's, of course, something interesting happening here. the naming of the different devotees connected with the different food that they have offered to Lord Chaitanya is significant, because in the Chaitanya-caritamrita, in all bhakti literature, in all devotional life, food is a vehicle for bhakti. It's a carrier of bhakti. That's why Prabhupada said ours is the kitchen religion, because we prepare and we invest our bhakti in the food preparations we prepare. And we offer to Krishna, please take, we're not saying take this food so much as take this bhakti. And then the Lord accepts, and what is He accepting? He's accepting the bhakti. And then we are taking the remnants, and what are these remnants? They're now full of bhakti, which has been accepted by the Lord. It becomes prasad, the Lord's satisfaction. Prasada has the sense of satisfaction. The Lord is satisfied, and therefore we become satisfied. So all these gifts of bhakti are being given by each of these devotees who are being named. We are not impersonalists. Lord Chaitanya is not impersonalist. He wants to know, who's this from? Who's this from? Who's this from? He goes on with more details. Verses 125, 26. The hard sweets made of coconut, mukutta, narikela, the sweet balls, the many kinds of sweet drinks, and all the other preparations were at least a month old. Imagine, after the Gaur Purnima festival, all the Mahaprasad, we keep it for 1 month. But although they wouldn't have had refrigeration. I mean, okay, maybe some sort of cool room, but not real refrigeration. Although they were old, they had not become tasteless or stale. Indeed, they had all stayed fresh. It's a miracle. That is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Within a very short time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate enough for 100 people. Then he asked Govinda, is there anything more left? Govinda replied, now there are only the bags of Raghava. The Lord said, let them remain today, I shall see them later. The next day, while taking his lunch in a secluded place, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu opened the bags of Raghava and inspected their contents one after another. He tasted a little of everything they contained and praised it all for its flavor and aroma. All the varieties of the remaining prasad were kept to eat throughout the year. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate his lunch, Aswarup Damodar Goswami would serve it little by little. Sometimes Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would take some of it at night. The Lord certainly enjoys preparations made with faith and love by His devotees. So it's bona fide to eat at night. Although in one lecture, Srila Prabhupada almost shouts, there's a recording, I think, when he's speaking about brahmacharya. And he says, don't eat at night. Anyway, this is the complexities of devotional life. But Mahaprabhu was eating at night. Well, can you imitate Mahaprabhu? Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent the entire period of Chaturmasya, 4 months of the rainy season, in the happiness of discussing topics of Krishna with his devotees. And then there's more description of feasts. He was invited by different devotees, and this is what they would offer. And then he gives a list of all the things that they would prepare. I'm sure that Krishnadas Kaviraj was longing for something that wasn't available in Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, all he could get was roti and thick, heavy, Braj roti, and he's thinking, oh, I want some rice and some sweets from Bengal. Rasagula. So like this is the routine of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is extraordinary routine. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Chaitanya-caritamrita ki jai, Ananta-koti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hare Krishna. So, thank you all for having me here over the last few days, weeks actually, and I look forward to coming back soon. Hare Krishna.